I'm Ellie Mae O'Hagen. I'm a freelance consultant for Neon, and I write for The Guardian. I won't say that I recognise some of the things that Natalie said in the last presentation because it'll get me into trouble, so I'm just going to move on. So I'm going to talk through what Neon is working on at the moment, which is our communications hub, which is a big thing, but I'm going to focus on one small element, and I'm going to be really fast because, let's be honest, you will want to drink wine and go and look at the monkeys. So I'm going to be super fast about it. This is the catchy title for this presentation, Using Moments to Embed Frames into the National Debate. So basically, the sort of big flashpoint moments in the news, how we can use those moments to get our frames into the kind of public debate. That's what I'm going to be talking about. Neon is a network of 400 civil society organisations. We work across political parties, NGOs, campaign groups, big ones, small ones, some as big as your head. And basically what we do is we provide a series of tools and training programmes and skills to basically make these organisations better at what they do. There's lots of different arms to it, and I'm a freelancer for the comms section. So basically we just want to make sure that people working in progressive organisations and campaigning for progressive causes are doing as well as they can possibly do. Our three main areas of work: this is our comms hub, this is the element that deals with communications. So we do framing and messaging work with PERC. Rich Hawkins, that spoke earlier, is from PERC. The Press Officer Network, which basically where we train press officers in the kind of 101 of press officer-ing and basically help them improve on their work as press officers. And the Spokesperson Network, which you may have already heard of because we basically people in the news who sort of speak on progressive issues in the news, we give them media training, we introduce them to producers, that kind of thing, basically just to ensure that there are more progressive people in the news. And the ethos really behind the comms hub is that we fill the gap, because we know that if any of you work in comms, you'll know that your day-to-day work, it means that you don't have time to think about the big picture, you don't have time to think about what skills you need, and you don't have time to think about what other organisations out there are doing similar work to you. So really the purpose of the comms hub is for us to try and do that work for you. So that all the bigger picture stuff that you really should be thinking about but you haven't got time, we try and think about on your behalf and help you with it. So one of our key aims, which is what this is about, is to help communicators be more reactive. So when a big story drops, you can jump on that and kind of ride the wave of the story sort of making its way through the media. So we have long-term projects like the Framing the Economy project that Rich talked about earlier, which we worked on. Which was an 18-month project. It was funded by £250,000, and it was an in-depth framing project about what people think about the economy. We have medium-term projects, which are sort of days like today, where we get people together and train them in framing, or we help them develop their messaging. And then we have short-term projects, which is what this is about, which is kind of reactive huddles. So when something big breaks, we get all of the organisations together who might be relevant to that story and try and help them get all their ducks in a row so that they can put something out in the media and that hopefully it will get picked up. We have a series of environmentally focused framing days coming up, which is part of our medium-term work. And our first one will be in November, where we'll be working with organisations that oppose airport expansion. So this is our Spokesperson Network. Here are some of the people that you may recognise who are part of our Spokesperson Network. And these are some of the work that they've been doing. What we found is that often producers will desperately need a progressive person, but there's just nobody there. There's nobody who wants to do it or has the time to do it. And so really the Spokesperson Network, the aim of it was to sort of fill that gap. And these are examples of us successfully deploying people in the news at the right time who understand our frames or have done some of our framing training. And basically it means that we've been able to insert our frames into the news at key moments. We also have really good relationships with producers who sometimes come to our networking events and meet the spokespeople. And we have a 24-hour press line so that if producers are really strapped and they really need somebody, they can call us and they know that we will find them someone who will speak on the topic that they want to say, and we know that they will use frames that work and say things that we sort of, as an organisation, agree on in terms of our values. And we were actually inspired, of all people, by the Taxpayers Alliance to do that, because you may have noticed they're a very small and accountable organisation that are everywhere, and that's because one of the reasons for that is because they're incredibly easy to get hold of, because they have a 24-hour press line and they'll always give a speaker to producers that will sort of fill in the role of angry right-wing person. So here are some examples of really successful things. So we worked with the Bridges Not Walls campaign. We helped them get in touch with producers. We helped them plan the protest. We helped them we supported them on their comms work. And it meant that Bridges Not Walls became, on the day of Trump's inauguration as president, it became an international event. It went as far as Budapest. It even became featured in the Mexican Grand Prix, weirdly. And it was featured, I think, in Jeremy Corbyn's speech at Glastonbury. So, of course, the more historically minded of you will know that Bridges Not Walls is a Martin Luther King quote, but it's become associated with the opposition to the sort of reactionary elements of Trump's administration because of the Bridges Not Walls protests, and that's because we managed to get things in the media at exactly the right time. Another one, if you went on the protest when Trump visited London, you may have seen this chap floating past. He was the Trump baby. He's a sort of giant inflatable that was flown over London during the Trump protest. Obviously, the sort of jokey message behind this is that Trump is a giant baby who can't take criticism, etc. However, this actually received some criticism from activists for being sort of a bit frivolous. But actually, what this allowed us to do, because we worked very closely, in fact, the man in the high-vis jacket taking a photo is actually Matthew Butcher in the corner, our head of comms. So we worked very, very closely with Bridges Not Walls. We had, with the Trump baby team. We had media, basically it was like 48-hour media from across the world, non-stop, interviewing these people. And actually, even though kind of the surface message of the protest was sort of frivolous and jokey, when these people were interviewed, they spoke seriously about the issues that we work on at Neon, so things like the rise of the far right, moving beyond a neoliberal economy, and tackling climate change. And they inserted hard lines about these issues that we sort of agreed with other Neon members. So it was basically, we all know that there's limited airspace, there's limited time that you can get your messages into the media. And so really, this wasn't just activists taking the, I can't think of a word that isn't rude or offensive to the Irish, taking the joke out of Trump. It was also basically a media device that was actually quite sophisticated to create space for us to then insert our frames into the news, and it did that very well. And so these are what we're coming up with next, and we'd really like some of the people in this room who are interested to get involved. These are our rapid response huddles, and what they will do is, it kind of says there exactly what they'll do. But I want to give you a sort of an example of a story where we felt that one of these was really necessary and not there, which is, you may remember when Sadiq Khan revoked Uber's licence in London. Do you remember that? So what happened there was that decision was made, and none of the organisations, or the trade unions indeed, who had been campaigning about Uber actually knew about it. So the first thing that happened was that Uber put out a petition saying, Uber's great. Nobody, first of all, they started talking about employee rights, because that wasn't the basis on which the licence was revoked. And then they started putting a petition out saying it was outrageous to deny Londoners access to Uber, which in less than 24 hours got 500,000 signatures. And there wasn't really a coordinated response from civil society. And so that's a good example of something happening where we could have inserted our frames and our messages into the media about an economy that protects workers, that protects women, and moves beyond neoliberalism. But because the infrastructure wasn't there, we weren't able to do it, and Uber sort of got on the front foot and kind of controlled the narrative, and then we were left trying to claw it back. By we, I mean the progressives rather than Neon. So that's quite a good example of where there should have been this network that could have done these things, and it wasn't there. So that's it, short and sweet. That's just one small taster of what we do. And I gather I have to say something about what I hope we'll discuss in breakout groups. No? Okay, well I do have one thing, which is that one thing that I've noticed working with Neon, one of my main role is basically to talk about our work to lots of different organisations, like I'm doing today. And I've noticed that lots of different organisations are working on very similar issues, very similar iterations of the same thing, and they never talk to one another. And so if there's a big news story, often you'll get 7 different organisations putting out different lines on the same issue that all contradict each other. And what you'll notice is that, so for example, today we're talking about climate change. Oil companies never do that. They all have the same. They're very good, they're very slick, they're very coordinated, and they all have the same lines, and they're much more decisive about it. And so one thing I would like to talk about, or be interested in exploring, is how can the organisations in this room and beyond talk to one another, recognise that we do have limited airspace, but we all have shared values, shared goals, and shared themes to our work, and how we can make the most of that when these moments present themselves. So thank you.